Hi, this is Tom of Junkie XL. Welcome back to this tutorial in which we are going to talk about some tips and tricks on mixing big action drums. And in a previous tutorial, I showed you how we programmed the Mad Max drums and how we used the library that I especially recorded for Mad Max Fury Road. So I want to go back to that drum rhythm that we created in that tutorial, and then based on that I will show you how you could use a certain type of plugins to make the sound thicker and to use certain type of EQ, compression and limiting. So let's play this rhythm back how we left it. So we had a soft section here. And a loud section. So that's what we programmed. So let's now bring up the mixer page, and what we're looking at here is the group channels. We can also look at the individual channels, and while I'll keep playing the drum rhythm that we just programmed, I will go to that section and just show you how all the drum channels come in Cubase. We're bringing up the mixer section again. So in my configuration window, I'm choosing VST and audio, and that will bring up all the audio tracks. And as you can see, there are a lot of them. In a different tutorial, I'm actually talking about my template and how everything is organized. But here we get to the point where we see drums. So we see a bunch of solo tracks here. So I will play this drum rhythm quietly in the background. And we see, you know, all the solos come in here. And then we move a little further, and here we see all the taille drums, which were the 16 and 18-inch toms that we programmed. And here we see all the 2-packs that we programmed. Now in this scenario, might be a little confusing for some of you, because while you're listening to a stereo signal, if you look at the area here where my mouse is, you see that part of the surdo goes to the front and part of the surdo goes to the back. And then we see that here again and here again, and we see that actually with all these drum instruments. And that is because we recorded all the samples and mixed all the samples in quad. So we actually had a lot of microphones in the rooms surrounding the drums, and then I mixed it into a quad format. I usually like to leave the center channel out, and if I do need it, I just route some extra signal to it, and the same goes for the sub if I do need it, and that would then create the 5-1 complete component. So let's now go back to this mixer. So I basically did some pre-work on these surdos. So if we select, you know, these outputs, and I would bring up via my touchscreen the IQ, I see I already did a little bit around the 300 hertz. I just brought up 2 dB extra there, which is not too much, but just a little bit. And you know, when we go to various drums, you will find a slightly different settings. If I bring up the 2-pans here, we see, oh, there's also a little bit around 300, but then I also boosted a little bit about 5 to 6K upwards. That's just like a little bit of initially EQing and processing, but nothing, you know, too major. Now let's see what the strip has to offer, which is actually really interesting on Cubase. You see I use a little bit of tube compression here, and I think if we go down, I'm also using a little bit of the Magneto, which is a tape compressor. And you see the settings are somewhat similar for all these surdos, and if we go to the 2-pans, we see somewhat similar settings here. And I just bring up the compressors on the top. So it's very light compression on each track individually, just to to control the dynamics a little bit, because these were samples, and if you were to program rhythms, to try to create that compact sounds as if it was actually played live. It's actually great to use compression and EQ for that. So, as you also can see, not to get too much into depth here, is that I gave these tracks very nice icons. So it's a little easier, to distinguish one drum from another drum, if you have to scroll through the template really quickly. So here we see this is two pans, and this is bass drums, and this is then a drum kit, and we just move a little to the right. We see this is also a drum kit, and these are, bass drum kind of sounds again, and this is like another big tom. So it makes it a little easier to tell one group of instruments apart from one another. So I did show you now very briefly some initial EQing that I do on the returns from the sampler, and some initially compression and tape compression in the strip of Cubase 8. So let's now go back to the subgroups. So I'm just going back to my configuration window, and I made all these groups on forehand, obviously, which you can see in the tutorial about my template in Cubase 8. So I'm selecting groups out, and at this point I don't see the individual returns anymore. I'm just seeing my 38 group outs that I created to create stems offline in one go. So now we see these two channels here. So here we see Warner Brothers all toms, and here we see Warner Brothers all two pans. So on this channel we would listen to all the 16 and 18-inch toms, and we would be listening to all the surdos, and on this channel only the two pans. So let's just listen again to just the two pans on their own. Okay, so that's that, and I'm just stopping for a second here. I'm just going to mute this track, this subgroup. So now we're just going to be listening to the surdos and the toms. Good. So now we've listened enough to these separate tracks. Also here you see that I added some icons to the group channels out, so it's a little clearer, what is what. Now I want to talk about inserts that we can put on top of the group to make it all sound more like one thing. And in this tutorial, I'd like to feature the absolutely wonderful UAD plugins. For people that are not familiar with the concept, you should check it out on their site. You basically buy a card or a set of cards or one of the many sound cards that they offer, and that will give you a certain amount of DSP that will not make it heavier for your PC or your Mac to deal with these plugins, but they're offloaded off your system onto that card or sound card. And it will allow you to insert a lot of plugins into your session with practically no latency that sound absolutely fantastic. UAD is a company that's been around for a really long time, and they've always developed state-of-the-art analog gear, compressors and preamps and mixers. And they've used all that technology to put it into software modeled plugins. Now, in this tutorial, I want to feature these plugins, and I have actually two inserted here that I really love. I mean, I love them all. So we could basically just open up the list, and then you see, if you go to Universal Audio, you see powered plugins, and then you have all these plugins here, and we'll focus on a lot of them in other tutorials. In this tutorial, I want to focus just on these two. You see, it's a pretty impressive list, and they all sound great for different reasons. So let's now go back to this thing, and let's open these two up that I've inserted. So we're now looking at two plugins. One is an EQ, which is a modeled version of a Neve EQ, and right next to it, we're looking at a modeled version of the Fetso. And this is originally a hardware box that was built by Empirical Labs, and I actually had a few of them, and they sounded absolutely fantastic. So I was thrilled to hear that UAD modeled these. And the compression on these machines are just absolutely insane. And you can choose all these different functions here. If you follow my mouse here, there's an input level, and then you can choose whether you want to do a bus type of compression, or here you can simulate like tape compression with the warmth going up and going down. And there are these extra settings where you could make it more aggressive, and it's absolutely a stunning plugin that is feels very natural to work with it. Let's just focus on the EQ first. This one has a couple of bands here, you know, some really low frequencies that you can make hotter or you can cut out. This is the lower range of the plugin. This is the mid range, and this is the high range. And here you can filter low pass, high pass. So let's just switch this thing on while we have this thing running, and let's just experiment a little bit with some of the frequencies. What I love about this plugin is that you can EQ air into the drums. You hear what that does? It's really wonderful. And the same goes for the lower frequencies. And even the smallest movements you make have a big impact. Especially when it gets loud, you could tell the difference. Without. So let's start without. Without, and now in. It adds an extra thickness to it that I really like. So let's now switch on this compressor, and let's just focus on the louder section. You see, I've got warm set to 4, but let's do it without. You hear how very, very slammy you can get it. So I love the setting on 4, with just just like 2 to 3 dB compression. And it really adds that really, really, really nice punch to it. Maybe a little more. And now let's bypass the whole chain. You see what a difference that is? I mean, it's definitely a little louder. So I'm just going to output a little down. Quite a difference. Let's listen to it one more time. This is in. This is out. As you can hear, it's really nice to hear this together with the other 2 plugins. So let's now switch the other plugins on that are on the 2 pans, and let's just go to my previous window, which is the arrangement window, and let's make the cycle a little shorter. And let's now go back to my mixing window. And so now we're just listening to the loud section here. And let's just play this back. That's it. And now let's switch it out again. And back in. I think these plugins are a really nice addition on your drums, and I showed this really quickly how with only 2 plugins you can make your drums sound fatter. Usually when I do mix a score, I spend a lot of time on the individual tracks, and then I eventually get to the group tracks. But it shows you roughly how I work, that I have a little bit of processing on the individual track level and then more on the group level, on the group track level. And that way you just build the mix as you go. Thanks for watching this tutorial, and I'll hope to see you soon for the next one or a previous one. Bye.